headlines. The search for the missing AirAsia passenger jet continues. Indonesian officials say debris found in waters off the island of Borneo is 95% likely to be from the missing jet. The North Korean regime pledges loyalty to its leader Kim Jong-un and appoints him to the position of Supreme Commander of the Korean People's Army. And Korea's main benchmark KOSPI closes down 0.6% on the last trading day of the year, ending the year 4.7% lower. Hello and welcome to ARIRANG News. I am Kang Cheri in Seoul. We begin with the latest on the search for the AirAsia plane that went missing on Sunday over Indonesian waters. There have been reports coming in that dozens of bodies as well as pieces of wreckage of this passenger jet have been recovered. And for more, we are joined by Paul Yi from the News Center. Paul, so Indonesian officials have confirmed that they found the crash site of the jetliner.
Well, actually, there's been no official confirmation at this point that the remains were pulled from the missing plane. However, according to AFP, an Indonesian Navy spokesman said that more than 40 bodies have been found so far, adding that number is growing. Just hours earlier, the investigation team said they spotted a plane-shaped shadow in a search zone of the Java Sea. Now, officials are saying there is a very high possibility that the debris is part of AirAsia Flight 8501. Malaysia's head of National Search and Rescue Coordinator puts that likelihood at 95%. Today marks the third day of the international search for the airliner that was carrying 162 people while en route to Singapore.
And this is agonizing, to say the least, for the families and friends of the victims, but it's also difficult for Malaysia as a whole. I mean, this is a country that suffered from a number of aviation accidents this year alone.
Right, this is the third Malaysia-based jetliner to be involved in an air accident this year. Malaysia Airlines Flight 370 disappeared in March in what has become one of the world's biggest unsolved mysteries in recent years. The plane that was carrying nearly 240 people was flying from Kuala Lumpur to Beijing when it disappeared without a trace. Not a single piece of debris from that plane has been found to this day. In July, Malaysia Airlines Flight 17 was shot down over Ukraine by what many believe to be a missile fired by pro-Russian rebels. But it's important to note that AirAsia had a near-perfect safety record before this incident. Cheri?
Well, it's an incredibly tragic situation at this point. Thank you so much, Paul. Let's leave it there for now. But of course, we will be bringing you more updates as this story develops. And of course, Paul is joining us later in the program as well. Thank you so much. Now, in other news that we are following at this point, today marks the third anniversary since North Korean leader Kim Jong-un officially took control of the regime's military. Now, as the North celebrates this occasion, North Korea watchers say it's ever more clear that he has a firm grip on power. Lee Ji-yoon has more.
North Korea has one of the world's biggest armies, and Tuesday marks the third anniversary since its leader Kim Jong-un was officially appointed to the position of Supreme Commander of the Korean People's Army. With eyes on how the young leader will continue to craft his leadership in the years to come, Kim has largely cemented his place as a powerful military leader. The North's official Korean Central News Agency reported on Monday that Pyongyang held a national meeting to further pledge their loyalty to Kim. At the meeting, Army General Lee Young-gil praised Kim as a, quote, brilliant commander who's training the army to be politically, ideologically, and morally strong. Earlier this year, Kim reshuffled the cabinet, promoting four-star General Hyun Young-chul as the Minister of the Korean People's Army in an attempt to strengthen his grip on the military. Meanwhile, the KCNA reported on Tuesday that the North Korean leader observed female soldiers' military drills along with his sister, Kim Yo-jong. This is the first time that his sister had joined Kim publicly to oversee military exercises. And analysts say this might signal that she is rising in the ranks in support of her brother's reign. Lee Ji-yoon, ARIRANG News.
Following South Korea's proposal for talks with North Korea, some experts say the potential meeting next month could serve as a turning point for improved inter-Korean ties, while others say it will be a mere repetition of the past. Our Hwang Sung-hee had a chance to talk to an expert from the latter group.
Will South Korea's surprise proposal for talks give fresh momentum to inter-Korean ties? Professor David Kang at the University of Southern California sees it as a routine exchange of dialogue offers.
My sense is that both South and North Korea are looking for ways that they can improve ties without having to give up too much. And that's the problem, is that both sides are willing to make proposals. But I don't actually see a whole lot of new ideas on the table at this point.
He says as much as the two Koreas may want better ties, neither is willing to risk too much. That's why Pyongyang could consider Seoul's idea of more cultural exchanges in time for next year, which marks the 70th year the peninsula has been divided.
I think there's a lot more possibility for joint cultural events, the Asian Games, a soccer match, events like that. Those are relatively apolitical, and they're relatively easy to do, and they don't involve major policy changes.
Professor Kang sees South Korean Unification Minister Ru Gil-jae's offer as a carefully calculated move ahead of Kim Jong-un's New Year's Day speech, in which he is expected to express his willingness to improve inter-Korean ties.
I think the Minister Yu, has been searching for a way that he could try and actually move policy on North Korea forward. So I think that in this way, this is not too ambitious, but I think it's a very careful attempt by Minister Yu. And to that extent, I guess that North Korea would take it seriously. As I said before, I'm not sure that they will actually accept it.
Nonetheless, the expert does not expect Pyongyang to enter a cycle of provocation anytime soon, saying there's nothing particular on the horizon that will bother the regime that much. Hwang Sung-hee, ARIRANG News.
Ever since taking office, South Korean President Park Geun-hye has made it known to the world that she wants to create a peace park in the demilitarized zone. Here is our Kim Myung-gil with the latest on her administration's push for the project.
It has been more than 60 years now since the Demilitarized Zone, or DMZ, was created in 1953 through an armistice agreement. In the decades since, the 250-kilometer, 4-kilometer wide buffer zone has gone untouched by mankind, making an area that holds great interest for experts.
The DMZ presents a lot of challenges that mankind does not really know how to solve. It is the one and only place on Earth where we can pour in our thoughts and use our imaginations to benefit humanity.
The South Korean government has proposed conducting joint research of the ecology within the DMZ to turn the DMZ into a world peace park.
We will set up specific plans for the DMZ World Eco Peace Park and carry out joint surveys of the DMZ ecosystem with international organizations and North Korea.
The South Korean government has earmarked nearly $30 million for the Eco Peace Park project and hopes to conduct a series of on-site surveys next year. The government hopes to begin construction on the envisioned peace park before President Park Geun-hye's term ends in early 2017. Kim Myung-gil, ARIRANG News.
For the latest in news that impacts Korea and the world, join Kang Chae-ri for a lively half hour that covers politics, business, international news, and much more. Live at 8 every weeknight on ARIRANG TV.
Human Rights Council headquarters in Geneva on Thursday, finding ways to Korea's current account surplus hit a record high last month, continuing with its surplus streak into a 33rd straight month. The Bank of Korea says the surplus reached $11.4 billion in November, surpassing the previous record set in October last year. Both exports and imports dropped from a year earlier, but inbound shipments shrank at a faster rate due to falling oil prices, with imports logging $40 billion and exports slightly over $50 billion. The country's accumulated current account surplus has totaled almost $82 billion so far this year, nearing its annual forecast of $84 billion. The Korean economy is showing signs of recovery, but picking up a decent head of steam is proving to be quite challenging. Statistics Korea says the country's output across all industries edged up 0.1% in November from October, marking the second straight month of increase. It did slow, though, from a 0.3% monthly increase in October, though. The rise in November was driven by a production in the manufacturing and mining sector that saw output rise 1.3% during this period, helped by demand for cars and semiconductors. However, when compared to November last year, the figure was down 0.5%. Recent reports point out that Korea is losing ground to China in major export items like mobile phones, while local manufacturers are already having a hard time competing with those in Japan. The government has laid out plans to tackle these issues, but they've got a long way to go. Our Hwang Jie has the details.
Earlier this year, China-based Xiaomi took the crown in its local market as the biggest smartphone supplier, replacing Samsung Electronics. What's more surprising is that China's major smartphone makers have outpaced Samsung and LG in terms of global market share. And experts say manufacturers in Korea are not just facing risks coming from China, but also Japan, which is introducing aggressive marketing strategies thanks to the weak yen. They add that the overall competitiveness of the Korean manufacturing sector is on the brink of a downward spiral in the face of an aging population and low birth rates. But some pundits say Korea should turn the crisis into an opportunity so that the local manufacturing sector can make another big leap forward. Take the United States, for example. The government has developed 45 research centers aimed at bringing innovation into the domestic manufacturing industry. The Korean government also announced they plan to breathe new life into the manufacturing sector in June, calling it the Manufacturing Industry 3.0 Innovation Strategy. But the detailed plans that the government promised to lay out by the end of this year have not come yet, while local companies hesitate to make investments amid a sluggish domestic economy. Hwang Jie, ARIRANG News.
Korean builders clinched $66 billion in overseas construction projects this year, the second highest total in the country's history. The Land Ministry says this year's figure was up 1.2% compared to last year, but still fell short of the government's target of $70 billion. The contracts spanned across more than 450 firms in 99 countries. The Middle East was by far the most lucrative place for Korean builders in 2014. Nearly half of the $66 billion secured came from this region, which is a traditional stronghold for Korea's construction industry. Today, in the last trading session of this year, Korea's benchmark KOSPI closed down 0.6% to 1,915 points. And for all of this year, shares dropped to 4.7%, marking one of the worst scorecards among G20 countries, which averaged a near 9% rise. Russia was the only country that saw its shares dip by a bigger margin than Korea. They dropped 45%. The index started off 2014 above the 2,000 mark and breached 2,090 in July thanks to a government plan to boost growth led by Finance Minister Choi Kyung-hwan. In recent weeks, however, falling oil prices, the weak Japanese yen, and disappointing performances from major conglomerates like Samsung and Hyundai have dragged down share prices. One of the election pledges made by President Park Geun-hye was to achieve a 70% of employment rate. But there are chronic problems the labor market faces here in the country. If radical changes are not made soon, though, the labor minister says Korea is going to face much bigger issues down the road. Connie Lee tells us more.
The push is on for a complete overhaul of the nation's labor laws. In an interview with Korea's Chosun Daily, Lee Ki-kwon, the minister in charge of employment and labor, said that if Korea does not change its labor market regulations by the middle of next year, we will face serious problems. The minister is speaking against the backdrop of chronic labor problems facing the nation, such as a high youth unemployment rate and a large number of contract or temporary workers. Korea's rigid labor market has long been a major issue. Youth unemployment stands at 8%, much higher than the overall jobless rate. And the number of contract workers is more than 6 million. That's 22% of all workers here in Korea. And compare that with the average number of contract workers in other OECD nations, which stands at less than 12%. To tackle this issue, the government has proposed a set of plans to improve working conditions for temporary workers. This includes making sure contract workers aged 35 or older can work at the same company for up to 4 years instead of the current 2. However, these new proposals are being met with criticism from both labor unions and employers.
If the employees get laid off after 4 years of work, where will they go? It will be harder for them to get a job.
This plan places an even greater burden on companies.
While recognizing the need to find some common ground, the Minister of Employment and Labor called for companies to be more flexible in the face of greater global competition. Connie Lee, ARIRANG News.
Twins are not an uncommon sight here in Korea. That's because the proportions of twins, triplets, and other multiple births among the total number of childbirths in Korea has increased threefold in 20 years. Statistics Korea says the so-called multiple births accounted for 3.3% of babies born last year. In 1993, that figure was at 1.1%. The increase is attributed to more Korean women turning to fertility treatments. The findings have shown that the chance of having a multiple birth rises to 25% for pregnancy through in vitro fertilization. Koreans' love for movies is validated. According to the latest number, we apparently go to the cinema more times than anyone else in the world this year. Korea's movie theater chain, CGV, says the average Korean watched 4 movies on the big screen in 2014. The data, based on research from Britain's Screen Digest, has Koreans on top of the global list, followed by people in the US, Australia, France, and the UK, respectively. And for the second year in a row, the number of movie tickets sold in Korea topped 200 million. The Korean film Roaring Currents was the most successful this year at the local box office. And now we move on to a new exhibition here in Seoul. Apparently, this exhibition gives visitors a chance to travel back in time to, say, 18th century France. Our Park Ji-won takes us there.
Want to time travel to 18th century Paris? Since that's not a realistic option, this exhibition is the next best thing. It's like a personal invitation sent by an aristocrat of the time to visit their beautiful residence. The exhibition has recreated a neoclassic French-style garden and put on display multiple rooms from the period, using real decorative items from 18th century France. From antique furniture such as armchairs, tables and dishes, and even a toilet, visitors feel like they're getting an inside look at the private life of a French nobleman some 300 years ago. The items came from France's prestigious Decorative Arts Museum, which boasts some 150,000 objects.
This year marks the 150th anniversary of the Decorative Arts Museum, located in the western wing of the Louvre Palace. This is the first time that the museum has ever lent its collection out. Curators at the museum have a good impression of Korea for its dynamic art scene.
The 320 items currently on display in Korea don't just show the glamorous lifestyles of the nobility of the time, but also the delicate craftsmanship that remains a key part of France's cultural heritage to this day. Park Ji-won, ARIRANG News.
And taking a look at other international stories making headlines today, the rescue of passengers from a burning ferry in the midst of a storm in the Adriatic Sea has ended with 10 people confirmed dead. And Paul is joining us again from the news center. Paul, the full evacuation of the stranded vessel took some 36 hours. This despite rescue crew working through extreme conditions from gale force winds and high waves.
That's right. The Italian Coast Guard said Monday that some 430 people were safely evacuated. However, a serious discrepancy has since been discovered on the ship's manifest. Investigators found that the original list had about 48 additional names, raising fears that many more could be missing. Officials say that boats and helicopters will remain in the area to continue searching for possible victims. Meanwhile, many of the passengers saved from the blaze are receiving treatment at hospital, recounting the chaos aboard the Norman Atlantic.
Some patients were found to have been staying in low-temperature environment for long, while some others were found with closed injuries. The children sent here need further observation and treatment.
The investigation into the deadly incident is still underway. Italian and Albanian prosecutors have ordered that the ship be seized to investigate the cause of the fire, which is still unknown.
And let's shift to the crisis in Ukraine. The country's top leader has vowed to seek a peaceful solution to the ongoing conflict with pro-Russian rebels in the eastern part of the country. This has been a tumultuous year for the people of Ukraine. Nearly 5,000 lives lost since April in this fighting. So how is Kiev approaching the situation?
Well, Ukrainian President Petro Poroshenko says Kiev is ready to hold talks with both its western and eastern partners. He added that long-term peace and stability in eastern Ukraine should be established through diplomacy and dialogue. Poroshenko made the statement at a press conference on Monday, pledging that Ukraine will continue to keep its end of a trilateral ceasefire deal which was reached back in September. This as he stressed that there was no military solution to the crisis.
In previous talks, we've made an agreement that I will meet German Chancellor Angela Merkel, Russian President Vladimir Putin, and French President François Hollande on January 15th in Astana. As I said earlier, the Ukrainian foreign minister will arrange this meeting.
The pledge came after at least 3 Ukrainian soldiers and 14 anti-government troops were killed earlier in the day. A series of battles near the war-torn airport in the rebel-held city of Donetsk marked the end of days of relative calm.
And finally, turning to the U.S., Americans have once again named Hillary Clinton as their most admired woman in the world. That's according to a fresh survey by polling agency Gallup. So Hillary remains a huge political figure in the public eye after all these years. What's next for her?
Well, the former Secretary of State is widely expected to be a candidate in the next U.S. presidential election in 2016. And the results from this latest poll mark a positive sign for her second bid for the White House. Hillary Clinton has held the top spot on the Gallup list for 13 straight years now, winning the honor a total of 19 times since 1993. That's when her husband, former President Bill Clinton, took office. In second place was Oprah Winfrey, followed by Nobel Peace Prize winner Malala Yousafzai. As for the men, President Barack Obama led the 2014 list. He's been the most admired man in the U.S. for the last 7 years, since 2008, when he was first elected president. Pope Francis came in second, while Bill Clinton trailed in third place. Chetty?
All right, let's leave it there for now, Paul. And thank you so much. Really appreciate it. And we will see you again in just about 2 hours.
Hello and welcome everyone. I'm Kim Bo-kyung. Fine dust levels affecting air quality across the nation have eased up, but concentrations continue to remain high in some places, and it looks like the dust should gradually move out later tonight. Well, it was a mild winter day, but keep in mind that snow or showers are set to begin on the west coast early tomorrow morning. So it looks like up to 10 centimeters of snow may fall in both Jeollado provinces. So keep that in mind if you are making plans to head outdoors to celebrate New Year's. So moving on, tomorrow's snow or rainfall coupled with strong winds should lead to a dip in temperatures on New Year's Day. On to tomorrow's ratings. Seoul reaches 1, Daegu hits 4, Busan hits 9. On to other regions. Jeju remains warmer at 11, while Dokdo hits 8. Those are the updates we're following at this hour, and back to you, Teddy.
Bo-kyung, thank you very much, and that will do it for this edition of ARIRANG News. Thanks for watching.